So the bad news is that, unfortunately, Darius is not able to, Darius Jones of USAA, who was going to be the moderator of this panel, is unable to make it to the conference. And what I recommend is people with, not right now, but people with access to the internet and to YouTube visit the Intelligent Assistant channel that Opus has with the videos from our London gathering. Because what inspired this particular panel is that Darius delivered the keynote in London and described USAA's efforts to introduce, well, their efforts to define and evolve an intelligent assistant that is suitable for USAA, which, bear in mind, is a huge membership organization for military members and their families, and has a diverse set of services, has people in various stages of their lives leaning on the self-service and customer care fabric of this organization. And he was describing their efforts to make it well, to develop intelligent assistance, and he called it their moonshot. And clearly it's a journey that will take a number of years, and where as you go along, you discover, as you uncover things, what the little gaps are, the little tweaks that need to be made. And we promised as Opus that we would keep an open forum going to describe or give a platform for people to discuss what their challenges are as we define what the meaning of intelligent assistant is. And it was Darius and my idea to have an opening panel on the second day of real thoughtful people to just sort of discuss some of the things that we've uncovered this far. And as I explained yesterday, the way we want to frame thinking about intelligent assistance at this particular conference is what's doable now, what do we think is on the horizon in an 18-month to 2-year period, and then what the steady state is at some point in the future. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and make sort of describe their businesses and their involvement with thinking about intelligent assistance and that sort of thing. and then we'll launch into some questions that Darius had prepared in advance. So I am, in essence, I'm not as charismatic, but I'm channeling Darius right now. But let's start from my left, your right, with Ty. Just an opening hello.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ty Harmon. I'm the founder and chief of technology Reconnaissance at To The Edge. We're an organization that helps our clients to identify, test, and analyze emerging capabilities. So our portfolio extends between exoskeletons to autonomous vehicles to advanced IoT work. Currently, we're involved in 4 projects that are related to the topic of this conference. I don't like to call them bots, but they're basically the ability to provide the right information at the right time to the right person. And that implies, obviously, a lot of the capabilities that have been discussed over the last couple of days. And the last thing I'll say that is unfortunate Darius is not here. I'm a 21-year USAA member, okay? And I don't buy them because of their technology.
Exactly.
I don't retain the services because of their technology. When I have a problem, when I've had a claim, when I've had a leak on Christmas Day in my chimney, the next day somebody's here to put a tarp on my roof, in a week it's fixed. When my wife lost a ring, they didn't ask questions, they paid the claim without any type of information. So yeah, it's about customer service, and I think yesterday it was well put by one of the speakers. It's about having a problem and solving that customer's problem with the right information. But it's also about empowering those people to make those types of decisions to be able to accomplish and solve that person's problem. Now, when any insurance agent calls my house, my standard line is, I'm a USA member, and they hang up the phone. That's what we all want to achieve in terms of loyalty. So I'll channel little Darius and give a little plug for them, because obviously if you have a member that speaks like that, then they're doing the right thing.
Very good. Michael?
Thanks. I'm Michael Cenkl. I'm the Director of Innovation and Technology for the MITRE Corporation. The MITRE Corporation is a not-for-profit company that operates 7 federally funded research and development centers, and most of our work is for various aspects and agencies in the U.S. federal government, ranging from the DoD, the intel community, to healthcare and cyber. And so my area of interest, I think, relevant to, so we have a very broad portfolio of technologies and research. I think one of the areas that undercuts or that supports a lot of the work that we are currently doing and are really looking at doing for our sponsors is in the area of applying cognitive computing to what we call cognitive assistance. And again, this is about really providing intelligent assistance or cognitive assistance for decision support based on contextual information that's available. So we're really looking at cognitive assistance capabilities that deal with both how humans will interact with and work with machines in order to support better decision making, better strategic planning. We're also looking at how effectively machines will work together, or agents will work together in the context of a combination of human and machine interactions that, again, will sort of help achieve our sponsor outcomes or support decision making, both in sort of the strategic arena as well as in the healthcare space, where we're looking at how intelligent agents can actually be applied to sort of improve patient outcomes or patient-centric outcomes from the healthcare perspective.
And Edwin.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was good.
Good. My name is Edwin van Bommel. I'm the Chief Cognitive Officer of IPsoft. Means that I'm the global leader of the Amelia platform. I work closely together with our founder, Chetan Dubey. He takes care of the R&D. I basically take care of the rest, which means finding the right use cases with our clients, rolling the solutions out, operating them, and maintaining them. Currently operating across many industries with Amelia, helping in government, telco, banking, insurance, travel. And Amelia is, as stated here also before, a virtual agent which really understands natural language, not only just links to a website, but fully operates and executes the process to solve the client's problem, taking into account also the emotions of the client. Before IPsoft, I worked at McKinsey & Company, was one of the partners starting McKinsey Digital. I worked there for 16 years.
Very good. So we're well credentialed here. And getting back to Darius, well, Ty used the magic word bot, and if we recall yesterday, the term, the groups that spoke sort of attributed some of the acceleration of interest in this whole intelligent assistant environment to Mark Zuckerberg, challenging people to develop bots for the Messenger platform. And as Darius would say, everybody's got to have their go-to-market term, and bots has gotten some traction. But I'll start with Ty. How do you feel about the use of the term bot, which I remember as being sort of like the first malware out there were these bots that just sort of traveled around on the internet and stole your password and stuff. But how are you feeling about it?
Well, I think you got to play the cards you're dealt. Okay, and each of us have to sell this internally to our organizations. Okay, and so if the executives are reading things from Facebook or there are others, and that's the coin of the realm, leverage that. But you got to define it in a way that makes sense for your organization. So it's just not bots. And I think there's also a danger in using that as a primary communication, because you need to explain what it is and is not. There's going to be even more information coming out. There's going to be a lot of disinformation. For all the suppliers in the room, please be kind to the clients to give them the right information and not oversell what you can and more precisely what you can't do. So those are very important things. But I think you can use it to your advantage, but you got to use it wisely. Use it wisely to talk about what it is and is not, what kind of capabilities you need to have, and most importantly, understand and be able to communicate the gaps that you have as an organization to be able to meet that vision of what the bot is supposed to be able to achieve. So you've got to have a very strong communication path. And again, use it to your advantage. IoT is another word that a lot of people use. In the government, years ago, it was the global war on terror, and everybody kind of stamped that on every funding that they had. And so right now, in many industries, if you put bot on a capital planning, you got a better chance to get it approved. But that comes opportunity, but it also comes with risk. And you got to mitigate that risk by having a good talk track around the capabilities you need to have, the gaps you have in your organization. And if you can do that, then you got the foundation of a strategy to make this vision of bot a reality.
So, I think that AI has sort of has a rich history, right? And notice I'm not going to start with bot, but I'll sort of start at the necessary underlying technologies, because I think there are a lot of problems that remain to be solved sort of underneath, exposing intelligent agents via bots. And that is in the area of natural language processing, dialogue management, machine learning, right? Deep learning technologies, context, the data management, the data privacy issues. I think the user experience piece of this, exposing sort of systems that really are built on those kinds of fundamental technologies through bots, is really sort of the key element. But I think when you talk about and bot is not necessarily I resonate with Ty's point about about the value of the term bot. We prefer the term cognitive assistant or cognitive agent, because it sort of, for us at least, it seems to suggest that there's a lot of cognitive computing that has to happen underneath it, and then the bots are really exposing the hard work that's been done there. So for me, and I'll be maybe a little controversial, but to the point of Ty was making, where if bots what you have to put in order to get a project funded on the research proposal or on the proposal. I mean, there was a time when cloud was the term. Everybody talked about it. Nobody knew exactly what it was, but there was a lot of deep machinery required in order to make it happen. Bot might be a shorter version of cloud. There's a there, but you have to be very specific about what it is that you're actually trying to do.
I actually completely adhere to that.
No controversy.
Yeah, so I think overall as an industry, we do a great job in confusing our clients in the market with all kinds of different terminologies. And if you talk to me about a bot or a virtual agent, I mean, there's such a big space on what the meaning is of that word, that typically when I meet clients, I sometimes spend the first 15 minutes just purely to explain what is all going on in the world of cognitive and AI, and also specifically about bots. Personally, we use also virtual cognitive agent as more collaborative term internally and also with our clients, purely because we're all aiming to create a great customer experience, to create also great use cases and also financial business cases for our clients, which means that in the end, you also have to replace people to do that or sell more than human beings. I mean, just call it out here. And just with a bot, that's impossible. I mean, you need to be much closer to the human experience, which people are used to, although it's not always the best practice. And just purely with a bot, you can't do that.
Well, I'd be remiss not to chime in on behalf of USAA, where the project they're working on comes out of the contact center community, and there's deep loyalty among the employees as well as the clients or members of USAA. So there's part of the responsibility of the individuals who are designing the plans for intelligent assistance is maintaining an interesting role for the agents. It's not replacing the agents. And I'm interested in your thoughts there or reactions there.
Unfortunately, sometimes when we do projects, we look at a floor of people that are doing context or green screen management, and we look at it and say, cognitive assistance or those types of capabilities can wipe out this entire floor of people. And that's just the reality. I think that in many cases, there is a decision support function that is definitely there. I think a lot of the business cases that we have put forward and helped our clients develop on these types of technologies have been around decision support. But there is that feeling in the back of their minds, in the back of our minds, that this is really about eliminating of roles. And that's, if you talk about where it's going, you know, the question is, companies inevitably want to minimize their cost and their overhead. And so, yeah, right now you may have cognitive assistance capabilities that are supported by learning algorithms and machine learning on the backside for that human assistance. But how long will it take for those algorithms up the front to take over 90% of the work, 100% of the work? And then what does that mean? And I think that's a serious responsibility. I mean, if you really are going to put together a strategy that looks to this, and this is around any disruptive trend, the most resistance you're going to get within your organization is from the people that don't think they have a job or a future in your company. They will put on the brakes. They will do everything in their power to resist and to blunt the change you're trying to implement. And so if you're going to go down this path and you have a future state vision, even if you don't want to reveal it to the organization because that may not be appropriate, you better get your HR partner involved and start talking about career paths, new future state competencies and skills, how you're going to develop those people. And if at least you put that out into the organization alongside your strategy for whatever disruptive trends you may have, you're going to have a self-selection process. And so people that want to stay are going to go through that training program because they feel you've given them a place to go to. The people that don't want are going to leave. And you know what? That's okay. But if you don't have that critical point in your plan, whether it's on bots or cognitive assistance or intelligent agents or exoskeletons or robotics, you're going to run into problems. So you have to think about this as in terms of internal adoption as well. And when we talk about support versus displacement, I mean, do a poll and see how many of your people that you're going to be providing these capabilities really see it as a support tool or as a replacement tool. Be interested to see if anybody's done that and has any comments about what they found in that type of analysis.
I suggest there's a role for an HR bot too to sort of figure out best action for. But the flip side of this keeping the humans in the loop equation is taking the member's point of view and thinking about the intelligent assistant or bot that it's interacting with. Because we've talked about two different states. One is where USAA has an intelligent assistant that you contact directly as a member, and then we've talked about a world where USAA has had to work with Amazon, or so that there's a presence on Alexa. And once you bring this idea of a metabot or a bot of bots into the equation, you have a lot of other things to answer. And I'm just wondering if you, and I'll start with Michael, had thought about the how do the bots talk to other bots sort of thing.
So I think that's a great question. I absolutely agree with the idea that sort of the future here really needs to be, there's a lot of deep expertise, right, that is almost stovepiped to the point of sort of having almost idiot savant bots, right? If you look at things like Netflix or Amazon, where what they're lacking is they're lacking any kind of real contextual awareness. I mean, they're expert within their domain to some extent. I use the term expert, I guess, loosely. But imagine what could be done if, in fact, something like Amazon, right, could provide more richer interaction, not just watching what you purchase, but also have access to more context about why you're making those purchases. So, for example, if you're planning on going on a trip to Hawaii, right, something that a lot of these deep bots are today ignorant to. They could be much more useful in terms of guiding you and selecting what it is that you are actually needed in order to have, for that specific contextual engagement that you are going to have. That applies across a variety of mission scenarios. In order for that to happen, you need all of these agents to really be able to converse amongst themselves. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to have the contextual data be something that is your data as opposed to Amazon's data or Netflix data, and then you decide what part of that context is shared with which particular system in order to help you make those decisions.
And would you agree?
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think there are two dimensions on this one. The first one is more on the front end, indeed, that an Alexa can be an entry point, for instance, like a Viv, which is going to be launched, etc. But there can always be a second bot on the back end who really knows a lot within the context of an insurance or a bank or the travel itself, who then takes over the conversation. What we also have is a lot of discussions more on the back-end side. So, for instance, if you would do, again, an insurance underwriting or you would do a mortgage, why could not a bot talk, for instance, with a real estate bot asking about the valuation of a house in natural language instead of, let's say, direct API type of connections, so that if there's something goes wrong in the process, you could even just follow the conversation between the bots and see where the mismatch was, right? So I think that's certainly also an aspect of bots talking to each other.
And how does USAA approach that? And I don't know, there's another way to frame it, and I'll ask Darius's question directly, and this is for you, Edwin, so you get the sense that having either this cognitive agent or intelligent agent operating on my behalf based on what it knows about me or what I've revealed about myself trigger responses. And let's assume, as Darius wrote here, let's assume that that's 1,000% correct. and we're at this point where it actually works and people have grown accustomed to it. Do you have a thought of why that would have succeeded? We're in 2025. Why we're successful this time when initiatives that were using web-based commerce or had speech-enabled IVRs with natural language understanding, where they maybe fell short. What is the magic sauce here that has intelligent assistants succeed?
Great question. By the way, I think it's earlier than 2025. If you
think 2025 is too early?
By far our ambition, I think, of many of us here in the room as well. I think there are.
Let's just have it done before I die. Okay.
That's
yes. Mike. Sorry, but talk real loud, and I'll repeat the question.
How does USA do it? Are they using an IPsoft product? Is that why you directed the question to Edwin?
There's a number of vendors, including Nuance, who can answer some of our questions.
So I can answer, but I can repeat questions.
Okay, so the question was, because Darius wasn't here, he said, how does USA do this? And I believe he directed the question to Edwin, and so I was wondering, does USAA use an IPsoft product? And then you have the answer.
And this is, introduce yourself, Robert.
Yeah, well, thanks. And sorry, and Darius. So I'm Robert Wiedemann. I'm the general manager and EVP for Nuance Enterprise Division. So USAA's complete system is developed by Nuance. We implemented natural language in the IVR 10 years ago. About 2012, they launched Nina, our virtual assistant, in their mobile application. Mobile banking application was actually the first enterprise app to do that. What they're doing today, and to kind of tie in what Dan was saying, is they want to visualize the virtual assistant as a conversational, intelligent brain that is independent of the presentation layer. And that you can have this virtual conversation in the IVR. You can have it on the web, on mobile. We can actually do it through Alexa today. You can have it on Facebook and WeChat. And through a single investment in this virtual assistant, you can actually enable customers to engage with USAA across any channel that number one, USAA wants to support, but also that the customer actually wants to engage with USAA. Then you fold that into another element that we've implemented for them called HAVA, Human Assisted Virtual Assistant. And the question around humans cooperating with the virtual assistant is literally true. And so both based on, and by the way, I'm a 40-year member of USAA ex-Air Force.
I knew it was
We're all
risky
gonna
saying
pull rank
21.
here.
So.
Ex-U.S. Air Force. And so the notion here is not only is the virtual assistant smart enough, so that's another reason to get human assistance, right? So the person asks a question, not really sure, it asks for help, but more for the customer experience, right? That this moment in time, even the virtual assistant can answer correctly, that's not the best way to deliver higher levels of service. And so then you want to be able to transfer into a live chat, into a phone call, into an outbound message that might offer to call the member. And so there's a real focus on taking the conversational intelligence, the cognitive intelligence, and adding it to human-assisted intelligence, both to facilitate the experience but also to facilitate learning. And so it's a very comprehensive system that's actually deployed today, including the virtual assistant helping the agents themselves. And so not just as a customer-facing element, but the agents actually can use Nina as a coach and ask questions as they're going through the engagement with the customer live.
I know that Nuance brands it Nina. Does USAA brand this Eva? Is that what they call Eva?
That is Eva.
Okay. It is Eva.
So we have over 50 deployments. Nina's deployed at over 50 enterprises worldwide, FedEx, Coca-Cola, and so on. They all brand it their own thing, so nobody calls it Nina, and it's Eva at USAA.
Interesting. But Robert raises a point that was another question that Darius has me queued up to ask here, which is, so we have a situation where an individual is contacting what might be a virtual agent, might be a human being assisted by a virtual agent, and we're wondering if there's a new kind of ethical decision that has to be made where you disclose what you're talking to. I mean, should we have to say, okay, you're talking to the virtual, some web chat agents let you choose between a virtual and a live agent. I mean, that's a conscious decision, but we're describing a situation where in the course of a conversation, you're sort of toggling back and forth. How do you see that emerging where we don't know whether we're talking to a cyborg or a fellow
yeah, we are always very explicit when it's about Amelia. We think it's just fair to be very clear on if you talk to a virtual agent or to a real human being, which also means when Amelia forwards a call to a human agent, she will also tell that I'm now going to forward you to a human agent who will finalize the conversation.
Carbon-based life form.
Reason for that might be that someone asks for something on which Amelia is not trained. Amelia also measures the EQ, so the emotional state of the person on the chat or on the phone, and also based on that, she might decide that the direction is south instead of positive, and escalate on that as well.
Everybody agree?
Yes, I think it also goes back to some discussions yesterday. It really depends on the context of the question. Mm-hmm. Right? There are some that I think we all know that if we just got an agent today, when we hop in our car and Google magically displays on our phone through push notifications, it's going to take 18 minutes to get to where we're going to go. That may not be, quote, considered a bot in this room, but it's a very interesting push notification of technology. That's not really a big deal. If we're doing a 401k transaction, I think came up yesterday, if we're doing something with healthcare, then yes, there is. And I think the other thing that we talked about in our scoping call here is, there's also the question of what's the outcome of that guidance, right? What's the risk that's given by that intelligent agent, and what's the potential impact to the customer? If we're giving some just general recommendations on places to eat, that's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. If you read the article, and I know you said this was a little bit morbid, but it's to the point, where Waze sent somebody in the wrong neighborhood in Brazil and the people got killed, right? So there's two different things about how, what the risk is associated with bad directions in a bad part of a neighborhood or those types of things, or financial. And I think the other thing we're going to have to just watch is the legislation and the lawsuits. So we're going to have to watch the courts to see how they're going to respond to this. And, you know, some organizations may put a pause button because of the courts and waiting to see how things are going to unwind there. Other people are going to go ahead and plow forward. But I think it really depends on the context of the question, where you have to fully disclose, where you have to partially disclose, or where you have to be explicit that the agent is not going to facilitate that transaction because of the sensitivity of the nature of the sensitive nature of that request.
So I think simply today, yes, I want to know. Tomorrow, I may actually want the intelligent agent versus a human, because I know that they'll probably do a better job. I think it comes down to trust, and risk,
magic word,
and trust frameworks. So I could see, you know, having a trust assignment associated with the particular agents that I'm dealing with, based on some kind of a scale that really gives me the kind of assurance to handle the risk situations that Ty was saying. But you know, today, I think, you know, Ty's example is a good one. You know, people today shockingly overtrust systems. Just look at the Tesla autopilot, right? You know, people believe that technology is much better than it actually is. It will eventually get there, but not quite there yet. But I do think that this idea of trust frameworks that we do a lot of work in, I mean, we also work for the FAA, for example, and we're starting to look at some of these transportation questions. So I think, you know, how much you really want to cede to these intelligent or cognitive agents is going to increase certainly over time.
So you called it hitting pause, but you know, there's you know, you described a factor that would sort of slow things down. Are there other areas where having intelligent assistants or bots, you know, intervening in our lives, where they'll hit little sticking points or find friction? What should we be thinking about?
I think it really depends. I mean, who would have thought that we'd have the first lethal action from a robot in Dallas?
Who?
Yeah, so bomb disposal went in for the sniper situation.
Oh, that's right.
And on its own, detonated and killed the assailant, right? And that was, you know, that's an intelligent agent on that was designed to go do certain functions.
For real.
And that's the first use case publicly known where we have that type of thing. So just like with Tesla, you know, somebody taking their hands off the wheel, falling asleep against the guidelines, and unfortunately having some problems with, you know, bright daylight in the background and the vision of the car not being able to see, you know, died in an accident. I think that there are always these precipitating events that we can't forecast, and that these things cause major shifts in the landscape. And just a very quick example, we were sharing, and then Edwin Snowden came out, and now we're hiding. And so we've seen a big spike in the ability for encryption technologies and the like, and that's a result of, you know, one of these events that is unknown. So I don't think there's a pause. Maybe that was a misstatement. I think that there's just a consideration, depending on your industry, depending on the use case, about what the legal implications might be. And we always recommend, and this is another military construct, is to take a red team, blue team approach to these things. So a blue team says we're going to use this capability for our advantage. You get a people of miscreants in your organization, troublemakers, and you ask them to say how are they going to use the same capability to destroy your business. And usually when you have that inside out, outside in approach, you kind of fill the holes in your strategy. So the point is that when you go through these things, you have to think about the unintended consequences. You have to think about how things are going to be very successful, and you have to think about how things are going to go horribly wrong. And if you do that, you might catch some of these potential issues, like Target didn't do a few years ago when they had a pregnancy algorithm that they decided to do a mailing campaign. Yeah. And the article, I think we all know the name of the article, or should. It's how Target told a father that his teenage daughter was pregnant. Right? So there's those kinds of outcomes as well.
The bot did it.
The bot did it.
I'd like to open up for questions from our attendees. see Wally.
This is to pick up on something that Michael said. This is something that's been rattling around in my brain for the last few weeks. You're talking about the bot actually eliminating floors of people in the contact center potentially. I guess what concerns me a little bit is I've been in automation for self-service forever. And I guess what concerns me is, will we get to a point where, as a consumer, I can't speak to somebody. I can't reach somebody because we have a wall of bots, because everything is automated. And I'm a great believer in the mix, that there's escalation and there's need for escalation. But I'm just curious to know if the panel has a view on that, and what the social implication will be.
I'll direct it to Edwin first.
Oh, no. For now, for the next years, I actually expect there will be a mix. If I talk with our clients and listening to what their strategies are, most of them have the mix strategy. And then again, the bots can be used also on the background to actually make the call center agents much better. Because let's face it, we did not make the lives of these people very easy. I mean, they interact typically with 10 up to 40 systems. That's the max I've seen so far. With all kinds of requests where they really have a hard time to do their job, poorly trained, lots of rotation. So I think there's still a lot of leeway as well to improve the human interactions by putting more intelligence in it and make it much easier for them to do their job. So for me, listening to our clients, there will be definitely a mix. Some of them will have the strategy to close it off. I mean, you already see some companies where it's almost impossible already now to speak to a human. And I think it will be very much a market proposition which companies will use.
Oh. First, second.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could address the issues of semantic interoperability between bots that came up several times. I was wondering if you could comment on strategies or approaches.
Who's best suited? Let's have a volunteer here.
This is what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit.
This is really the tough nut to crack. I think we'd all agree. I think I have not personally seen organizations really be taking a full stride in this to be able to get that. I think it's an evolving process. There's a lot of capabilities that still need to be put in. And this is where I think some experimentation and finding the right resources to tackle, because every industry is different, and that's part of the challenge. And so when you start orchestrating across industries, it makes it even more complex, right? It increases it exponentially in terms of what you're doing. So I've seen some, as Michael said, tackling some of these in very unique domains, but the cross-domain, which is really the purpose of the question, I have not seen very many cross-domain solutions. I don't know if my colleagues up here have seen any either.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Let's ask Tom Hansen, Mark Hansen, I'm sorry. Tom Hansen is an Avaya guy. No, Mark Hansen. Or
I'll take it, because we tackle this also. We see it playing out, well, the way it is playing out right now is as follows. The first is there's an orientation to get the virtual assistant that you have to be able to cover more channels so that you can kind of address that. That includes how does it interact with the most pervasive consumer virtual assistants like Alexa and Siri and those things. That's very dependent on the vendor opening up those APIs to enable that. Amazon has, so there's a way for us to use Echo, speech recognition, text-to-speech, but it's really Nina that's answering the question, the consumer. So I'd like to speak to FedEx. You actually now can. That's going to evolve into the ability for, and again, if APIs are available, instead of using the appliance or the virtual assistant as an input and output mechanism to actually have those virtual assistants cooperate, they're both natural language conversational systems. Then you run into, are they as intelligent? And it's the same as people, right? So we have some customers that are really versed at talking to a virtual assistant, chatting to a virtual assistant. They do that, they like it, they can do it well. There's some people that struggle with it, right? And it's a generational thing, my generation and up. But that's getting better. at some point, it really relates to how can you know that the virtual assistant on either side of a conversation between virtual assistants are actually intelligent enough and are context aware of what they're being asked. And that's where the hard problem comes in. And it will be a while, I think, before that happens, not only because of people needing to open up their platforms, but we implement for a lot of enterprises. There's very high sensitivity to data. They don't want that data shared with other outside entities, whoever they are. And I think that that's going to really restrict that. And if we do our jobs right, it's not really going to matter that much. But eventually, I think it will come together, but it's going to be a long time, we think.
Can I just jump in on that?
And then Katrina, and then we have to move on to the next. But go ahead.
So I think I would agree with that today this is really the programmatic API. This is really a service consumption model as opposed to a AI to AI kind of conversation. That's where we are. I think the idea of context and really models, models not only of the individuals that are developed by the bots, but models of what are the capabilities and the domain-specific capabilities that the agents actually have in order to get to that kind of interoperability. I do want to make a point around the data element, which is, and this is my personal view, I can see that data, which today is really almost proprietary to the purveyors of these bots, being treated more like something like electronic healthcare records, right? Where it's really the data and the interactions belong to the user, and I as a user get to dictate or be permissive about, which service am I going to release this data to, because I think that intelligence is going to do the best job for me in this particular context.
Maybe one last remark. I have actually seen it already within operation, but more on internal use cases, because there you can completely control the domain and the language. So in those contexts where you can fully control it, you can already get stuff up to her.
Yeah. Interesting. One last question.
Hello, Katrina Wallace from Flamingo. So Flamingo is a virtual agent, Rosie, who's involved in financial services. So we're involved in actually selling financial services product. Rosie guides customers through their purchase decision. So the two things we're facing now, and I'd love your perspective on this, is general advice versus personal advice, and what the implications are when a robot is providing that, and then the licensing, the need to license a bot to actually sell as opposed to an extension of a company's license. So very grey areas in the chatbot strategy.
Who would like to?
No, I actually see also the world moving into that direction. The licensing is indeed still a big obstacle, but there are ways around that as well. But there's always a conversation you can have which is not advice, but still can lead to a purchase, and I think that's currently the balancing act. But I do agree that more and more, looking still at also in many industries at the low conversion rates, which apps have and online and websites have in sales, that more and more companies are actually looking at virtual cognitive agents as a potentially next success in boosting the conversion. Yeah, so it's definitely a trend. Yeah.
I would just add that this is indicative of most technologies where we have some sort of regulatory hurdle or regulatory gray area that isn't really defined. And generally what we see is our clients going to where there's the least amount of friction, right? So if you can find markets, and this is true in healthcare, unfortunately, everybody goes do their emerging technology work in India, in Africa, in South America. If you want to do drones, you don't do it in the United States, per se. You go somewhere else to do it, right? Because wherever that regulatory environment, that allows for the innovation to happen. So if you have low regulatory hurdles, go there to try these things first, to demonstrate some capability, demonstrate the validity and the security of a service or capability, if not just agents, but any type of capability. And then you can bring it back into more established, more highly regulated markets. So we see that across the board. Is everybody running to lower regulatory environments to do these experiments, because the regulatory hurdles really blunt some of these changes. So you're not going to be like Uber and just go right around all the taxi laws. You're not going to be like Airbnb and just go right around all of the laws. You might be able to, but that's the decision you have to make, is can you move fast enough to get enough customer sentiment on your side, and you got enough in the war chest to go through all the litigation.
And be hated.
To be able to do that. So, yeah, there are different strategies to overcome that. There's a safe, and there's more of a headstrong bull in the China shop strategy.
And with that image, and in the interest of time, let's thank this panel for uncovering these issues. You can